Welcome back. This is Rodolfo Novello, and in this video I'd like to talk to you a little bit about controllers, actions, and parameters. In the introduction of the series, we learned that the MVC pattern is made up of three components: model, view, and controller. However, I want to mention that the view is not necessarily required, as I will demonstrate with the following example. Let's you remember that originally we talked about having a home controller and an index action result method, and we went through it using the our routing mechanism, that we didn't necessarily need to include the controller in the URL, that we can define defaults. Let me create a new controller so you'll see that the view is not absolutely necessary. Let's create a controller and let's call it the about controller. Okay, about controller, and let's use a template. Okay, so in a few seconds we have a controller that has a bunch of action result methods, and now at this point we don't have a view. Okay, so let's do this. Let's create here another method. Let's call it public let's return public string hello. Okay, and all it's going to do is return, this is a valid response. Okay, so every method returns something. In this case, this method called hello in the about controller is going to return a string. Let's see if it's going to work. Okay, so the control we want is the about, and we want hello. And as you can see, it does work as expected. And as you can see, we don't have a view specified, or it has not been created for the about controller. So we can return anything as a response, and it comes back as an HTML response to the browser. Okay, I'd like to talk to you now about parameters. We can add parameters to this. So let's say we want to include a string called name. Okay, and let's see if we don't have a problem here. Plus name. Let's see if that works. So it will be expecting a name. So let's run it again. Let me close all these. Okay, so I went to the home folder. We want to go to the about, hello, and we want to include a name. Let's say Alice. Okay, so we can pass in a parameter, and we're getting precisely what we want. Okay, so at this point we have not done anything with the route. Let me show you one more thing. Let's say that we want, like we did before, we're going to define the about controller as the default controller and the action as the hello action. Okay, and let's run it again. Okay, so it's expecting a name parameter. Let's say name Rodolfo. Okay, so you can see that we don't have to define the name of the controller or the name of the action, and we can specify a parameter, an input parameter that goes in, and it gives us a result. Okay, now let's go a little bit further into this. You see that it is expecting an ID. If we were to change this ID for name, okay, which is the input parameter that we have here. Okay, so now the names match. Let's call it parameter name. Okay, parameter name, and let's change it over here so we'll have the same variable and not get confused. Let's see what happens. So now, as you can see, the route expects, let me close the others. Okay, if we wanted to use what we used here, okay, we don't need to specify name. Let's see. No, actually, we need to specify the action, which is hello. Okay, because our route requires an action. Okay, if we were to remove this action, we can just use the parameter name without controller or action, and it will default to the correct ones. So we can say Rachel. Okay, so you see we don't have to specify the controller or the action, and since the name of the parameter is the same as the one that we defined in the routing URL, we don't need to use any special syntax to pass in the parameter name. Okay, so up to this point we have worked with only one parameter, and I want to show you this how we can work with two or more input parameters. Let me paste here this little method called sum that will just add the two input parameters, x and y. Now let's go back to our route. In our router, let's change the action to sum to make it the default, and let's remove this parameter name, and let me show you. Let's go back to the original URL configuration, which is controller / action / ID. Okay, so this is our standard configuration. We want to receive two inputs. So we saw before that, let me show you here, that's expecting two parameters, x equals, let's say, 6, and y equals 8. Okay, so we get 14, which is the sum of x and y. Okay, we saw that we needed that special syntax, the question mark and the ampersand, to specify what the input parameters are. Or we can do this. We can say that x is the first parameter and y is our second parameter. So if we run it now, okay, so we can see that we need to specify the controller, the action, and now instead of typing the question mark and the ampersand, we can use those two variables. Just two input parameters as part of the URL itself. Okay. So that's really cool. Now let me show you one more thing. We can define a default value for one of the parameters. Okay, so that is going to be the default for our parameter y. So let's see if that works. Okay, so we say about slash sum slash, let's say if we just include the value for x, it gives us 13, which is 6 plus 7 equals 13. So we can specify that. Furthermore, as we saw before, we can remove both the controller and the action, and we can make them we can use by default about and sum. Let's see how that works. Okay, so we don't need to specify the controller or the action, so we just need to put, let's say 5. Okay, 5/5. That should give us 10. It does. If we remove the last 5, it will be replaced by the default value of y, which is 7, and gives us 12. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I wanted to share that with you. And there are several types of action result classes that we can return. One of them is the JSON. So let me show you how we can return JSON straight into the website. Okay, so let's create a public action result called my just JSON sample. Okay, our JSON sample is going to populate a let's use one of our model item, MVC model item, my item equals new model item, and let's populate it on the fly. ID equals, let's give it any ID. Name, if you remember, we created this class on our first video, and let's give it a name. Name of this item and quantity. Let's say we have 20 of those. that hand. Okay, and let's return JSON our item. It's my item. Okay. And we need to specify the behavior that we want. JSON request behavior. We want to specify that the GET requests from the client are allowed. So allow GET. So we have an ID of 78, name of this item is the name, and the quantity is 20. So let's go back to our route and modify it to, let's see, all right, we can access it. We just need to call the JSON sample. So let's run it. And let's invoke JSON sample. And we have JSON as our response. We can also build a redirect request to a different client. Let me show you here. Let me paste some code. Okay, let's try. Let's go with the first one first. We can redirect to an external HTTP page like this. Let's see if it works. Redirect external. Look at our routing. Default, it requires a controller, requires an action, although they are by default about and hello. So we can do this. So about is our controller, redirect external is our, let me show you, redirect external is our method. So we call it, and it should redirect us to ABC News. Okay. Now let's do a redirect internal. We can redirect to internal pages very simply. Let me paste in here. So let me call it, stop it. So the method is called redirect internal, and we use this method that requires a route, and a route being defined where it is going to go. We're creating an anonymous route, anonymous variable here, and we're going to send it to home index. You remember the home index action result method gives us this kind of information and a list of our models. So let's see if it's going to work. Okay. About redirect internal. Mistyped something here. So it does send us to the home index view as we have defined right here in the redirect, in the about controller redirect method. Okay. Okay, so that's it for this video, and we'll look more into MVC functions later in another video. Thank you.